Good evening, I'm Robbie Alampay. The big stories tonight. The world watched in horror as a mob of pro-Trump supporters stormed the U.S. Capitol to block President-elect Joe Biden's win. But it did not stop the U.S. Congress from affirming Biden's victory. Trump says there will be an orderly transfer. The Hong Kong resident who tested positive for the British variant of COVID-19 is a Filipina domestic helper. Contact tracing is now underway in Cagayan Valley and NCR, but a team of experts believe the infectious variant might already be here. The body of flight attendant Christine Dacera has been flown to her hometown of General Santos City. Her family refuses to believe that all her friends at the night of her death are innocent. But speaking anew with the media, 4 of her friends that evening maintained their innocence. They say they did nothing but look after her welfare. And with just a little over a year and a half left before the next elections, both houses of Congress have revived talks on charter change. But proponents from both chambers insist term extension is not part of the proposed amendments. We begin tonight with a pro-Trump siege that sparked at the U.S. Capitol building in an attempt to overturn the results of the U.S. elections. The Philippine Embassy is verifying whether there were Filipinos who participated in the violent protests that claimed the lives of 4 people. Marian Enriquez with a big story.
Hundreds of supporters of U.S. President Donald Trump stormed the U.S. Capitol on Wednesday evening, U.S. time. They attempted to stop Congress from certifying the victory of President-elect Joe Biden. What began as a raucous rally against the defeat of the incumbent president boiled over into a siege. Rioters were seen tearing down metal barricades and breaking windows to push their way inside the building. 4 fatalities have been confirmed, including an unidentified woman who was shot by a police officer. Over 50 protesters, meanwhile, have been arrested due to various charges, such as carrying of unlicensed firearms.
But when the people that say back the blue and support our military, these are the people that they're tear gassing this afternoon.
The violence forced lawmakers from both House of Representatives and Senate to suspend their session.
Today, a shameful assault was made on our democracy. It cannot, however, deter us from our responsibility to validate the election of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris.
Biden has denounced the Capitol siege, calling it an unprecedented assault on the citadel of liberty.
It's not protest, it's insurrection. The world's watching. Like so many other Americans, I am genuinely shocked and saddened.
Trump, for his part, implored his supporters to go home, but went on to insist that he had won the election.
This was a fraudulent election, but we can't play into the hands of these people. We have to have peace. So go home.
It took 3 hours for authorities to clear the Capitol and declare the situation under control. Philippine Ambassador to the U.S., Jose Manuel Romualdez, says this is a first in the country's history.
So everyone here is quite stunned by something like this to happen, especially in the Capitol, where it's supposed to be one of the most secure places here in Washington, D.C.
According to Romualdez, they are still verifying if there were Filipinos present during the riot.
Just reports that we received that there were some Asian Americans, some of them were Filipinos. We don't know how many were there, but we're still verifying it just for our information. But we all know that there are supporters of the Republican Party and President Trump, mostly from the Midwest, Filipino Americans.
The embassy has previously estimated that 38 to 40% of Filipino Americans residing in the U.S. support Trump. For News 5, Marian Enriquez, we are One News.
Despite the chaos, the U.S. Congress approved enough Electoral College votes affirming Democrat Joe Biden's win as the 46th President of the United States. The joint session of both houses of Congress resumed hours after the pro-Trump supporters stormed the U.S. Capitol. Vice President Mike Pence presided over the session along with House Speaker Nancy Pelosi. Both chambers rejected 2 objections to Biden's win and certified the 306 Electoral College votes Biden received to clinch the White House.
The announcement of the state of the vote by the President of the Senate shall be deemed a sufficient declaration of the persons elected President and Vice President of the United States, each for the term beginning on the 20th day of January, 2021.
Shortly after Congress certified the poll results, outgoing President Donald Trump issued a statement saying an orderly transfer of power will take place on the 20th. Trump claims this means the end of, quote, the greatest first term in presidential history. Local health authorities have already started their contact tracing efforts after a Filipino tested positive for the UK variant in Hong Kong. Okta Research, meanwhile, believes the new variant is already likely here. What's their basis? Greg Gregorio tells us.
The health department has already identified a Hong Kong-bound traveler from Manila who tested positive for the United Kingdom variant of COVID-19. She's a 30-year-old Filipina domestic helper who hails from Cagayan Valley. According to their timeline, she traveled from Cagayan Valley to Metro Manila on December 17. The 30-year-old arrived December 18 and immediately underwent quarantine. She took a swab test the next day, which came out negative. She was then cleared for a Hong Kong flight on December 22. But after another swab test in Hong Kong on January 2, she tested positive for COVID-19. Hong Kong health officials confirmed her case on January 4. On January 5, she was reported as positive with the new SARS-CoV-2 variant. The local DOH says the patient is currently in isolation and in stable condition. In an interview with one PHS sa Totoo Lang, testing czar Vince Dizon says the DOH have already coordinated with OWA for contact tracing.
Lahat ng mga kasama o nakahalubigo nitong nagpositibong ito ay tinetrace na ngayon. Pero alam mo, kailangan talaga itong contact tracing natin, lalo pa nating paintingin.
In a statement, the DOH says they're waiting for more updates from Hong Kong. Contact tracing efforts are also in place in Cagayan Valley and NCR. Edsel Salvania of the DOH Technical Advisory Group earlier said that there's a possibility that the 30-year-old Filipina got the infection in Hong Kong. After the gene sequencing of 305 samples, health authorities say the new variant has yet to be detected in the country. But speaking with One News' The Chiefs, an Okta Research fellow has a different conjecture.
The way you bring this together is you say it is likely now that the variant is in the Philippines, but it is also likely that it's still very rare.
Fellow Guido David says the best line of defense would still be the observance of health protocols.
Right now, while we don't have the vaccine, the health standards are our main lines of defense against the virus. And we have to implement this.
Fellow Nick Ostriaco says a conclusion has yet to be formed since they can only rely on DOH data. For News 5, Greg Gregorio, we are One News.
Travelers from 6 more countries have been barred from entering the Philippines due to confirmed cases of COVID-19's British variant. These are Portugal, India, Finland, Norway, Jordan, and Brazil. China is also likely to be added once its government verifies the existence or the presence of the new variant in the mainland. Travelers from these countries will have to go through 2 swab tests, one of which will be given to the Genome Laboratory. Airlines say they have already put in place restrictions to be extended beyond January 15. They are reporting a 60% drop in passenger load since the ban was imposed last month.
January 15 is not the last day. We already accepted it, and at the end of the day, the airline will have to follow with what each and every country's implementation.
We'll go for a quick break. When the big story returns, the remains of cabin crew Christine Dacera have been brought to her hometown of General Santos City. Her family says the fight is not yet over. Friends who partied with Christine that evening maintain their innocence. Preliminary investigations over the incident will begin next week. Good evening, you're still watching The Big Story. I'm Robbie Alampay. NCR police have formed a special investigation task force to shed more light on the death of Christine Dacera. The persons who were with her that evening, meanwhile, insist they are innocent and they did nothing but look after her welfare. Dale De Vera has the story.
Authorities have yet to piece the puzzle behind the death of 23-year-old flight attendant Christine Dacera, leaving much room for speculations. But her friends who were with her on her last hours and have been charged for her death insist the police got it wrong.
Yung pinaparatang sa amin na binaboy namin siya, ni-rape. Hindi namin kayang gawin sa kanya yun at hindi kami ganong klaseng tao.
Yung rape na sinasabi po nila, hindi po namin magagawa yun sa best friend namin. Dahil una sa lahat, meron kaming nanay, kapatid na babae po, which is mahal namin at nire-respeto namin. Ganyan din po yung nararamdaman namin kay Tin.
They insist having taken care of Christine, who was very intoxicated that night.
Kakakilala ko sa attitude talaga ni Tin since matagal kami magkakilala. Naging close friend kami. Ano talaga si Tin, pag nalasing, may time na nangaaway, nawawala sa sarili niya, kung saang lugar siya magiging komportable, sa pagtulog niya, doon siya matutulog. Tapos minsan sobrang kulit niya. Tapos may time pa na lahat kami pinaghahalikan niya.
Si Tin kasi pag may nararamdaman siya, sinasabi niya sa amin. Sasabihin niya, naiihi ako, nasusuka ako, ganyan. So, nasusuka ako. Tumayo siya, pumunta siya ng banyo. Then ako, sinundan ko siya. Guys, si Tina sa bathtub, ayaw na bumalik. And then, binalikan ko ulit siya, sabi niya, hindi na dito na ako magpapahinga. So, okay, hindi ko na siya pinilit pa.
Question now focuses on what happened in room 2207 and if the guests there were involved in the incident. The NCRPO has already formed a special task force. NCRPO Chief Vicente Danao says they will submit more evidence to the Makati Prosecutor's Office. On Wednesday, the Makati Prosecutor's Office said evidence was lacking to prove Dacera was sexually assaulted and murdered. Justice Prosecutor General Benedicto Malcontento says they cannot file murder, rape, and homicide with existing evidence submitted by the PNP. However, the PNP says it will not dismiss the rape slay angle just yet. The PNP is still waiting for the toxicology test to determine whether or not alcohol intoxication and drug consumption caused Dacera's death.
Yung homicide kasi sinabi ko na sa inyo kanina, di ba? If somebody put or induce a drug na ininom mo at hindi mo alam, which caused your death, may kaso yon. Ang tanong is sino ang naglagay. Okay? So yun ang alamin natin. Kaya nga yung result ng toxicology is very important.
Danao admits that the initial evidence presented by the Makati Police is insufficient. The PNP said it will look into whether there were any administrative lapses on the part of the police investigators.
Yan po ang isang medyo nakakalungkot po na balita kasi unang-una nga po yun atin pong Soko ay medyo late na pong pumunta. No? So I think he went there few hours after. Kaya nga po ako lagi pong sinasabi sa ating mga tao, the very first hour on the occurrence of the crime is very important. Dapat nga po nandun kaagad yung ating first responder in order to preserve the whole crime scene.
The lawyer of Ray Ingles, one of the accused, says the CIDG has already released a subpoena that they have yet to receive. The NBI has already conducted forensic examination in the hotel room where the incident took place. Meanwhile, after receiving a show-cause order from the NCR Tourism Department, the City Garden Grand Hotel remains firm that they did not accept leisure guests on the night before Dacera died.
Sinasabi po nila na hindi nila inaalaw yung leisure guests, but you know, it runs contrary to the videos that we've seen, and you know, it runs contrary to the pronouncements of the persons involved, and it runs contrary to the pronouncements of the Philippine National Police as well.
The preliminary investigation of the case will be conducted on January 13. For News 5, Dale Devera, We're One News.
Christine Dacera's body has been flown to her hometown in General Santos City. While the respondents over the cabin crew's death were released, her family is refusing to believe that the fight is over. Jem Avancenia is there at the wake. We speak to her from General Santos City. Jem, how is her family taking the developments today?
Robbie, we were able to talk to Christine's grieving mother, Sharon, this morning. She's casting doubt on the innocence of her daughter's friends, and she's saying that they are preparing more evidences. It was 10 o'clock on Thursday morning when Christine Dacera's remains arrived in General Santos City. Her relatives and friends called for justice and condemned the untimely death of Jensen's supposed candidate for Miss Universe Philippines.
I feel so saddened about the passing away of a beautiful, promising young lady, supposedly to be one of the candidates for Miss Philippines. We condemn the incident that happened to her. And what we want now, as well as the family, bigay tayo justice.
Her mother, Sharon, can't help but be disappointed after authorities released the 3 respondents who were held for questioning over the death of Christine. She refuses to believe that they are innocent.
Hindi, wow. Ganun na lang sabihin ko sa kanila. Sige lang, kabalo man ang Ginoo sang tuod. Yan lang.
The 3 were released upon the order of the Makati Prosecutor's Office. The complaint against them, together with 8 others, will be subject to further investigations. Christine's family wants them to tell the truth so that justice will be served as soon as possible.
One particular suspect who was detained, yun yung may alam ng lahat. Sana pagsalita lang siya ng totoo, malaki yung chance na siya yung susi.
Due to alleged irregularities and inconsistencies, they seek more CCTV footage from the City Grand Garden Hotel where the party took place.
As I mentioned, may inconsistencies, irregularities from different sides, from different parties. Pero the evidence will speak the truth. Let's just wait for the autopsy report kasi wala pa po. Napagsimulan na pero hindi pa tapos.
They believe there's a possibility that the 23-year-old cabin crew was drugged before the incident.
Probinsyana anak ko, mabait, biktima ang anak ko dito, which she cannot speak anymore. Kaya pinaglalaban ko. Kung ano man yung kwento at istorya na pinapalabas nyo, wala nang kalaban-laban anak ko.
Robbie, most of the Desara's family and friends are coming here in St. Peter's Chapels here in General Santos City to sympathize with the family. Christine's burial is scheduled this coming Sunday. Robbie.
Maraming salamat. That was Jem Avancenia reporting live from General Santos City. 14 officials of the Public Works Department have been axed due to alleged corruption. DPWA Secretary Mark Villar says they were in talks with other agencies to help build cases against the erring officials. He says a shakeup will happen in the agency. President Duterte had earlier ordered Villar to clean the DPWH ranks. We'll go for a quick break. When the big story returns, both houses of Congress are starting the year with talks on amending the Constitution. They insist term extension will not be part of any proposed amendments. And 90s kids are going to have a ball over this bit of news. Basketball anime Slam Dunk is going to have a new movie installment. The details next. Good evening, I'm Robbie Alampay. You're still watching The Big Story. Senators are divided over a resolution that would revive talks on charter change, especially as elections draw near. Will this new effort to amend the Constitution see the light of day? Mayan Baños tells us.
Schedule is too tight to squeeze in talks on charter change, according to Senate President Tito Soto. For Soto, it's almost impossible to tinker with the Constitution given that the Duterte administration has only over a year left in office.
If yung dalawang provision na yun ang pag-uusapan, lalo na economic provisions, baka nga pwedeng piecemeal eh. Baka pwedeng through a Constituent Assembly, amendahan mo lang yung dalawang provision na yun.
But Soto says it may be more feasible to amend only a few provisions. But some senators worry that some officials will take this chance to push their personal agenda. Soto noted that during a Congress leaders meeting last year, the president suggested a constituent assembly to resolve problems with party list groups. Duterte supposedly alleged that some party lists are used to widen the influence of the CPP-NPA. But Soto insists the president has no intention of amending the Constitution's term limits provision, nor did he ever suggest a no-election scenario.
Ang malinaw na tinanong una ng Presidente pag-upo ay sinabi niya, I want this problem with the CPP-NPA solved. The best way is that we remove the party list system or change it in the Constitution.
A few weeks after the said meeting with the president, Senators Bato de la Rosa and Francis Tolentino filed a resolution seeking to convene both houses of Congress into a constituent assembly, introducing limited amendments to the 1987 Constitution. It limits amendments to provisions on democratic representation or the possible abolition of the party list system. It also seeks to amend economic provisions. Soto says the Senate has yet to reach a consensus on the matter, but once agreed upon, Soto says the 24 senators will vote separately from the almost 300 congressmen. Other senators are casting doubts. Senate Minority Leader Franklin Drilon says it is a sin to be even talking about changing the Constitution while the country is still reeling from the pandemic. He says it's a waste of time. Senators Ping Lacson and Kiko Pangilinan suggest a thorough discussion before acting on the reso. For his part, former House Speaker Alan Peter Cayetano said any move seeking to amend the Constitution should be set aside if it will not be beneficial for the government's vaccination efforts.
We all know that meron kailangan palitan sa Constitution. Hindi Biblia ang Constitution na hindi pwedeng amendahan. On the same time, we know it's a divisive issue.
Reporting for News 5, Mayan Los Baños, we are One News.
The lower house is also set to start the ball rolling on Chacha talks. Speaker Lord Alan Velasco wants discussions to begin on January 13. Constitutional Amendments Chairman Alfredo Garbin says they will focus solely on restrictive economic provisions, especially those dealing with foreign investments. He adds that political provisions like term extensions will not be discussed. They hope to target to finish deliberations by December in the hopes of simultaneously conducting the plebiscite and the 2022 polls.
I think the Speaker rightly put it when he said that this will also answer the problems caused about by the pandemic. Kasi there's so many, unemployment rate is rising, FDIs is decreasing, foreign direct investment, the inflows of foreign capital is also decreasing. Magkakaroon ng oportunidad, lalong-lalo na paglikha ng mga trabaho para sa ating mga kababayan na nawala ng trabaho.
Makabayan Blacks Carlos Zarate doubts the feasibility of any such exercise. He says the proposals are futile and have an ulterior motive.
Tingin namin dito sa pagbuhay muli nitong Chacha, no? Smoke screen lang ito at kabahagi ito sa tangka at plano ng kasalukuyang administrasyon. No?
After the series of typhoons that battered the Philippines in 2020, Metro Pacific companies have decided to turn over disaster response equipment to the armed forces of the Philippines. Metro Pacific Investments, PLDT Smart Foundation, One Meralco Foundation, and Metropac Movers donated trucks, rubber boats, and a non-combat helicopter to help the military with rescue operations. The AFP also signed a memorandum of agreement with the Makati Medical Center Foundation to upgrade medical treatment packages for military personnel. The deal will also help facilitate health trainings in disaster relief operations.
Our relationship with the AFP probably dates all the way back to 15, 16 years ago. So hindi lang naman ito first time na kami tumulong sa armed forces, no? So ngayon medyo nakakaiba ito kasi because first time kami nagdodonate ng helicopters, trucks and boats, no, for disaster.
It would surely boost the capability of the armed forces when it comes to disaster response.
Now time for the big stories in sports. A look at the game with Paulo Del Rosario.
Thanks, Robbie. Sun and Neo Phoenix guard Trudy Ravenna may be missing the B-League All-Star game, but he is now well on the road to recovery. The 24-year-old Asian import announces that his surgery on his injured right hand was a success. Ravenna was set to compete in his first ever B-League All-Star game and dunk contest before getting sidelined by his injury back in January 2. Phoenix Fuelmasters big man Justin Chua is among the candidates for the PBA's Most Improved Player Award. In an interview with The Game, Chua shares how his head coach Topex Robinson paves the way for his improved play.
Bibigyan kanya talaga ng opportunity to do what you can to help the team. Tsaka syempre, ipuput ka niya sa place where you'll be effective. Hindi kanya yung parang basta-basta na lang, bahala ka kung ano gusto mo gawin.
That's it for the latest in the world of sports. Catch us again later at 9:30 p.m. on One News and One Sports Plus. My name is Paulo Del Rosario, and this has been The Game. Back to you, Robbie.
Thanks, Paulo. Now, fans of Team Shohoku, listen up. The classic basketball anime Slam Dunk is getting a new movie. This was announced by manga author and series creator Inoue Takehiko on Twitter and on the upcoming movie's official website. It will be produced by its original creator, Japanese animation studio Toei Animation. The upcoming movie will be the 5th Slam Dunk film following the first 4 released in the 90s. And that wraps up today's big story. Catch us again tomorrow at 8 p.m. on Signal Channels 8 and 250. Please like our Facebook page, One News. For more in-depth analysis, visit our webpage, onenews.ph. I'm Robbie Alampay. We are One News. Good evening.